Good morning to you, and I'm glad that you joined us this morning. Here is the latest news from across the continent, and then we will get into our topic of discussion this morning. It is a minute past 10 a.m. here in Nairobi. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and joining us from today, being the 9th of February 2023. We start with the Standard newspaper. The main headline: Ruto power onslaught on Uhuru Raila. A base, President William Ruto has gone on overdrive, decimating opposition numbers in parliament, a move that has raised questions in parliamentary independence, given that majority have sworn allegiance to him. It also cast a spotlight on opposition leaders Raila Odinga and former President Uhuru Kenyatta, who have been outwitted on matters legislation and oversight. The act is bound to deflate the rallies called by Azimio to agitate for the lowering of the cost of living and a push for electoral reforms. That story is on page 6 and 7 on the Standard. Learning yet to start in some grade 7 classes. Causes of delays range from lack of teachers and facilities to not understanding new curriculum. Others include management and finances. Quite interesting there. The story is on page 4 and 5. Beware, with hot weather comes many diseases. That is on page 3. And farmers throng NCPB for cheap fertilizer. With subsidized manure arriving in cereal board stores, farmers are spending hours waiting in line to access the share as planting season beckons. That story is on page 19. And all hail the king, James. That is on the sports page. LA Lakers LeBron James became the highest points scorer in the history of NBA, breaking Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's 39-year record. That story is on page 49. Okay. And of course, the main pictorial just down there, honoring Magoha and possession in honor of former Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha at Starehe Boys Center in Nairobi yesterday. And then we look at the Star newspaper. Inside Uhuru's 655 million Kenya shillings pension perks. Provisions comes as former allies locked in vicious war. You'll find that on page 4 and 5 on the Star. HIV among Nairobi gay university students 6 times higher. That's according to a new study. Simmering dispute threatens to blow Raila's ODM party. You'll find that on page 6. Nigerian in-laws give Magoha a colorful send-off. All right, there you go. So what you're seeing just down there, Ayo masquerades representing 5 groups of deities among the Yoruba escort the body of former education CS from Professor George Magoha at Kenyatta National Hospital during a procession yesterday. It's quite interesting there. Yeah, okay. The Daily Nation, Matiang'i under police siege. Night of long knives. Former Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i was a man under siege last night amid reports police had raided his home in Karen, Nairobi. The reason for the siege, however, was not immediately clear. The story is on page 6. Raila calls Azimio crisis talks. Azimio leader is today expected to chair crisis talks following mounting rebellion to his anti-government protest rallies and poaching of opposition lawmakers by President Ruto. And then 34 counties flagged over 20 billion Kenya shillings illegal salaries. Now, a new report shows that 34 counties breached the law and paid nearly 20 billion in salaries illegally, escalating the runaway public wage bill and underlining the urgency to weed out ghost workers. The extra spending on salaries outside the law also reduces the amount counties can channel to development programs. The report revealed the public finance management law caps spending on salaries and public entity at 35% of revenues. The story is on page 7. And officers in kidnap extortion ring held. Very well. And Turkey earthquake toll jumps to 11,000 as more victims pulled from the rubble. A new NSSF rates will hurt workers, says employers lobby. The story is on the back page. So those are the Kenyan newspaper. We look at the Citizen from Tanzania. Meet standards to operate, government tells Elon Musk. The government wants the owner of the broadband service provider SpaceX, Elon Musk, to meet all requirements before it is allowed to roll out in Tanzania, with initial deployment date set to be within the first quarter of 2023. NSSF yet to find buyer for its multi-million-dollar project. And Tigo rolls out 5G, claims speed of 1 Gbps. Government faulted for failing to table amended media bill. Okay, that's. I'll get more of that for you later. And the New Times, that is from Rwanda. What you need to know about revised budgets. That is from Rwanda. It's in there. And the Daily Monitor from Uganda, traditional schools to offer free education. All right, now the Education Review Commission says established schools that will not implement the scheme will be stripped of government aid. The team has also put together 30 other measures to improve the country's education system, including scrapping government scholarships for undergraduate students and once study loans given to the rich who can refund. What? What kind of reforms are these? Okay. A new vision, from Uganda again. 7,600 teachers up for transfer. Affected schools include Old Kampala, Bukedi College. And then the Punch from Nigeria, World Bank, IMF, warn CBN, that is the Central Bank of Nigeria. And today we will be taking just a focus on this story from Nigeria and these new notes that are causing quite a fracas there, and we'll see what's really going on there. And Supreme Court stops Friday at 9. Shortage of new notes has caused hardships, disrupted trade payments. That is what IMF is saying. And INEC appeals Osun, poll judgment defends Adela's victory. And then fleeing Senator Mwaoboshi nabbed, sent to prison. Page 5 in that. Senator was fleeing from what? And then Turkey-Syria earthquake deaths now over 11,200. The Nation also from Nigeria, relief, joy as Supreme Court holds the Central Bank of Nigeria's deadline on old Naira. And the pro-people, the anti-people, that is also somewhere down there, Tinubu, El-Rufai, Wike, OPS, others hail the injunction, I guess, of these notes. Newsday from Zimbabwe. Government makes a U-turn on free education. Why? Okay, I'll get us more details of that story a bit later. Daily News, polls should not divide Zimbabwe. That is what the government is saying as it opens the door for more electoral reforms. So that is what we have on some of the newspapers from across the continent this morning, but there are also others from outside of the continent. So let me see if I can just find a few of this. The Independent from the UK, historic handshake that could send British jets to Ukraine. Prime Minister answers Zelensky's urgent plea to Parliament, give us wings of freedom. And the little girl who protected her brother for 36 hours in Rubble, quick death toll now passes 11,000. That is on the front page of the Independent. The Daily Express also from the UK, send Zelensky all our jets. That is the headline. And the Guardian as well from there, give us wings. Zelensky calls for UK fighter jets in historic address. Amid the rubble, people wait in vain for rescuers. That is the latest from the Turkey, Syria earthquake. Okay. Also the Daily Freedom, the Daily Telegraph. Yeah, and the main headline there is, give us wings for freedom. You know, President Zelensky went to the UK yesterday and he was addressing the parliament. So that's why you're seeing all these headlines. And the Metro, UK rain. Oh, UK rain. Oh, this is smart. It's Ukraine. So the partnership that UK and the help that UK is seeking to give to Ukraine. So now they have a new term for it. UK rain, Ukraine. Okay, let's move on. And newspaper, UK wants Putin. We may send fighter jets to protect Ukraine. So that is what we have there. So I guess you're now up to date with some of the newspapers from Africa and others from abroad. And I think as we were going through the papers, before we get to the details, usually, go through those headlines, and I just want to jump on right quickly and start looking at some of those stories making headline. But before we do that, let me first just update us with the current affairs as far as the weather across the continent is concerned. In Bujumbura, that is in Burundi, today it will be a bit sunny with some cloudy situations expected, standing at 22 degrees Celsius. Cape Town is 19 degrees Celsius with some sunshine. Harare, 20 degrees Celsius. There will be a lot of rain and expected throughout the day. And then in Mogadishu, some sunshine and a bit of clouds, 27 degrees Celsius. And of course, Nairobi, 22 degrees Celsius. The weather is really good out here. And let me see where else. Cairo, 10 degrees Celsius with some sunshine and some clouds spread across, and Dar es Salaam 23 degrees Celsius. There will be some rains expected, and there's been some tornado causing injuries and damage in Louisiana Parish, that is in the US. And of course, the death toll rises as cold grieves earthquake torn Turkey. They're also not out of winter yet. Remember, there are still a few weeks remaining in winter in those countries that really experience this winter as we know it. And so because of these cold conditions, it's been very difficult even in offering help or getting to these places, or just, helping out with what is required there in Turkey. And coastal storm to bring wind, rain and snow to parts of the eastern United States. And also, all right, so that is just an overview of some climatic conditions across the world. And there's a story I've been following for you in line with the earthquake, but also it's a sports story. Remember, I was telling you about this Ghanaian player who was caught in this rubble. I think yesterday there were reports that he was rescued, but then again today the reports are that, contrary to earlier reports, former Newcastle United winger and Ghana international Christian Atsu is yet to be rescued from the rubble of the earthquake that devastated Turkey and Syria. Relatives of Ghanaian footballer Christian Atsu told the AFP on Wednesday that they still had no news of the player for Turkish club Hatayspor after the earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria, despite initially reassuring information, while the Ghanaian embassy in Turkey and the Ghana Football Federation assured on Tuesday that the attacker had been found alive in the rubble of a collapsed building. Hatayspor coach Volkan Demir said on Wednesday they were worried about the fate of the former Chelsea and Newcastle player. So he said he's still missing. The club cannot find him among all the hospitals, and that also is what the family is saying. So we're just hoping that him and others who are still stuck in this rubble are safe, and they'll be able to get him. So that is the latest update. And you remember the story I was telling you about South Africa tourism wanting to sponsor Tottenham Hotspur. Well, yesterday that was halted. Yeah, in the morning they were, I was just updating you. Yesterday in the morning I was just updating you. Some of the, the opposition was raising a lot of questions about this sponsorship and all that. But later, I think Parliament passed a bill and said that is something that the country should not be doing. And I was listening to their reasoning, and it makes a lot of sense. They're saying that there's a lot of things that the country should be focusing on right now that is quite urgent and important to South Africa, so that sponsorship and that can wait. So they need to find solutions, especially to the power crisis that South Africa is going through. I remember President Cyril Ramaphosa just 2 weeks ago, they were having a summit for the ANC, and he said that his government intends to declare the power crisis a natural disaster of some sort, like a natural emergency, a national emergency, So if you're having a national emergency that you're supposed to be taking care of, but you also have some time to spare and see how you can sponsor an already wealthy team in the English Premier League, but with an aim of attracting more tourists in your country. So I don't know. So maybe you just need to focus on what South Africans feel is important, and then you can have that deal later if at all you truly believe that it is going to be beneficial to the economy of South Africa in terms of attracting more tourists in South Africa. But that is just the latest there. So now let's just turn our attention to this Naira problem and Naira crisis. In Nigeria, as I was just going through the headlines from the Nigerian newspapers there, you see it is the main story there, because the Nigeria Supreme Court suspended the government's deadline to stop the use of old currency notes. The Central Bank of Nigeria had ordered people to swap out old banknotes for the currency with a new design by February 10th deadline that was supposed to be tomorrow. But the directive led to cash shortages, protests and some attacks on banks. The court ruling halts the move by federal authorities and the Central Bank of Nigeria to completely phase out the old 200, 500 and 1,000 Naira bills by this Friday. The central bank has yet to respond to the court ruling, which comes ahead of another hearing next week. The decision follows a lawsuit filed by the Nigerian state governors seeking to keep these banknotes in circulation a while longer. Abdul Karim Mustafa, the attorney who filed the suit on behalf of the Kogi, Kaduna and Zamfara state governors, said on Wednesday the bid to transition to the new notes was causing political instability. In late October, the central bank redesigned the banknotes to curb crime, ransom payments and kidnappings and counterfeiting, and to regain control of the amount of money in circulation. Authorities say the measure has been successful. I don't know how you read success there in Nigeria, but from what we're seeing, obviously, there's been some challenges ahead, but they're saying, despite of that, we have been successful in this move. But millions of citizens across the country have been scrambling to gather new notes, and the situation has been especially challenging for some 40% of Nigerians in rural areas who have little access to banking services. And the daily struggles have resulted in protests and attacks on commercial banks. The Central Bank of Nigeria has blamed the scarcity of the old money on sabotage by commercial banks and has been cracking down on institutions that are not compliant. On Tuesday, President Muhammadu Buhari held a private meeting with the central bank governor and the head of the anti-graft agency, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. The closed-door meeting followed pleas for calm as citizens protested the cash shortages. The situation comes ahead of elections that is set to begin later in this month. In a nutshell, Nigeria is in trouble there, cash trouble. It's quite interesting, and the level of resistance that we are seeing in the reintroduction of these new notes, the 500, no, the 200, the 500, the 1,000 Naira, bills. We had a similar situation here, and of the reasons that Nigeria is giving, ours also some of those reasons, the counterfeiting and all that. But when you look at the reasons that were given, of course, there is a political element looking at where the country is, because even ours was done when we were approaching an election. So perhaps it is that political aspect, even in Nigeria, that could be now bringing all this chaos, because you see, even for those who went to court to challenge the deadline of submission of the old notes or exchanging of the old notes, and then you're given the new notes, you can see they're politicians. And so there had been some speculation that a lot of them were hoarding the old notes at home. And so, with this new move, they will be forced for you to get the new notes. Then you have to take your loot or your bags of money that you've been having at home, taking them to the bank. So that will force you to open a bank account. And so the aim of this was to have the over 80% of the money that is in circulation that cannot be accounted for in the formal financial institutions, to help the government be able to account for this money. So that was the main reason. And that's why, you can't be surprised that when it comes to money laundering and things like this, it is quite high in Nigeria. You think about it, when you have over 80% of your money, of the country's money, it cannot be traced. It is circulating within the economy, but it cannot be traced in the formal financial institutions, in the banks, in the circles, in any kind of formal, financial institution. But this money is just circulating around. So the government felt to regain control of the amount of money in circulation, then I think one of the ways that we could do this is just to introduce new notes. They redesigned the notes. I think it was quickly done, so they did that. And so now they allowed Nigerians some time to go and exchange these notes, for them to give back to the government the old notes, so that they could be given these newly designed notes. But that has been met with a lot of challenges, and the situation has been especially challenging for some 40% of Nigerians in rural areas who have little access to banking services. But the government had expected that. So what the Central Bank of Nigeria did, they had mobilized in some time back in mid-January, they had mobilized over 30,000 agents nationwide to help the vulnerable and those living in remote areas exchange their cash for the nation's new currency. The central bank also extended the deadline for exchanging the old bills by 10 days, and that the extension was supposed to end tomorrow, and that is what has been suspended now by the court to allow more time. I don't know until when, but the deadline has been suspended. So the central bank's deadline was on the 10th of February, and initially it was 31st, then they added 10 days, and now who knows. So, and they were saying some 30% of the old bills are still in circulation. So who are these people who are holding these old bills, who don't want to go and get the new money, the new bills? So the central bank is saying so far they've been able to get a good amount of money exchanged, but some 30% of the old bills are still in circulation. But critics say authorities should have stuck to the deadline for the currency swap. So there's one section of people who are saying the government should have stuck, because that is what happened here. When you introduce such a move, it's not many people who will be happy, especially the political divide, and if it is seen as if you're targeting this move is targeted, And there are those who are saying the government should have stuck to the initial deadline, which was the 31st, and the deployment of the Central Bank of Nigeria agents followed an announcement after the extension was given for citizens to swap their old cash for the new currency. Now, the central bank said the gesture was to allow more citizens to exchange their old bills and reduce the risk of losses, especially for those in Nigeria's rural areas with limited access to bank financial services. So maybe that was thoughtful, and they're assuming that a lot of people from the remote areas maybe could be the ones who had not yet exchanged their money. Now, in January, the Speaker of the House of Representatives threatened to arrest the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, over his refusal to appear before the House committee investigating the alleged scarcity of the redesigned Naira notes across the country. So there has been fuel scarcity, there has been the new notes scarcity. But with the new notes scarcity, there were also some banks who, I don't know, had colluded with let me just get us that story. But there were some banks, the Nigerian The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission on Monday arrested an operations manager of a commercial bank in Abuja Central area for holding the new banknotes. So you can see this scarcity could be, from the reports you're receiving, is man-made. This is something that the banks are colluding, I don't know with the politicians or with who. And why would the banks act in this manner? Your job is to be given the money to see that people come there and exchange the old notes, and then you give them the new notes, and to ensure that your ATMs have the new notes so that when Nigerians go to get their money there, it's there. But there hasn't been. There's been a scarcity of these new notes. And our statement by the EFCC's head media and publicity, Wilson Ojaren, said that the suspect was arrested by operatives of the commission for allegedly refusing to load the new notes in the automated teller machines, that is the ATMs, of the bank, despite having about 29 million naira of the redesigned naira notes in the branch vaults. And Sahara reporters had been reporting how Nigerians had been forced to sleep in the various bank ATMs across the country to be able to withdraw the new banknotes, to buy foodstuffs and other, things that they need, because they were worried they might run out of the new currency notes. The Nigerians Bankers Bank, the CBN, had several times accused the officials of the commercial banks of holding the new currency notes, insisted that the notes printed was enough, and if properly distributed, there shouldn't be scarcity. However, Ojaren stated that before the operation manager was whisked away for further questioning, the EFCC operatives had ordered the loading of all the ATMs and the payment of the stipulated amount across the counter, to the delight of distraught customers who had spent hours on queues without getting the new notes. According to the statement, this discovery, which indicates a sabotage, yes, I think that is what this is, of the government's monetary policy by some banks, was made by the EFCC in continuation of the ongoing surveillance and visit to banks across the country to access their vaults and verify whether they were deliberately refusing to dispense their redesigned naira notes. Meanwhile, the anti-graft agency has urged Nigerians finding it difficult to access their funds at any bank and suspecting foul play to contact the commission for immediate intervention. So I see the government there has set up some form of intervention for this situation. So I guess my question every time I have been reading through this story is, why would the banks do this? Why will the banks refuse to load their ATMs with the new currency? Who are they colluding with? Their job is to ensure that people are able to access these new notes. So what is really going on? Are the banks colluding with a section of Nigerians who are opposed to these new notes, or what is going on? And apart from just arresting them for questioning, are there laws that perhaps regulates those behaviors? And so it has been quite interesting in the manner in which this especially this policy has been being implemented there in Nigeria. And the central bank raised, this is just some of the things that even caused a problem just from the get-go, because initially even the how it was being implemented already was a problem. And like we've started, when we were starting this conversation, I was telling you, there are a couple of things that made the government to introduce these new notes. The bank says the new notes are being introduced to rein in counterfeiting. We know that. In Kenya, we call them wash. Yeah, it's just the fake money. And to promote a cashless economy by limiting the amount of new banknotes that can be withdrawn, and to reduce the large quantity of dirty notes circulating in the economy, as well as discouraging hoarding and curb crimes like kidnapping and terrorism, and head of illicit financial transactions. So when you look at the reasons here, and you can tell me if you agree or not, they seem to be very legitimate, because when you look at the kidnapping for ransom that has become a very lucrative endeavor, rather enterprise in Nigeria, and a lot of these monies usually are paid by cash. The money is taken by cash in bags. They ask for so much money, so this has become quite an attractive endeavor there. So the government is saying, by limiting the amount of money that one can get from an ATM or can get access to, then perhaps this will be able to curb things like kidnapping and terrorism. Are you just limiting the amount of money that people can withdraw from the ATM? But also I think they had limited the amount of money one could withdraw from the teller. And that caused a bit of, let me just see if I could get that, the limits that initially had been put there. And so the revised central bank withdrawal limits were announced in a circular released in December. The limit for individual withdrawals was raised from $225 to $1,125. This is per week? And the limit for corporate entities was raised from $1,100 to $11,000. Under the directive, any withdrawal above the set limit must be approved in advance in writing by the financial institution from where the withdrawal is to be made. All right, maybe this is a bit low because the CBN also lowered its processing fee for withdrawals above set limits. The new cash withdrawal limit, which was supposed to take effect today, the central bank unveiled newly designed this note. So it is the withdrawal limit that also caused a lot of issues there. You can imagine, is it per week? You are allowed to withdraw about $225 to $1,125, US dollars. That is quite. What if you have a huge household and you want to spend so much? But I understand if you are withdrawing the cash, but if you are transacting through mobile money, then perhaps you're allowed to make a bigger transaction. The people who are watching me from Nigeria and you're listening, you can help me out with that information down there. So a lot of these politicians who are opposed and the people who are opposed to this move, and when they were in December, as I said, the Nigerian House of Representatives summoned the Central Bank of Nigeria's Governor Godwin Emefiele, and after initially asking the CBN to suspend the cash withdrawal limit, and they were saying, the lawmakers were saying that this move might hurt the limit on the amount of money that one could withdraw, was going to hurt the small and medium-sized enterprises. And, so they were wondering how comes, and when they are deliberating on issues, it's not like they really care so much. So perhaps they're just using this as a means to oppose this policy by the government. But the citizens say the changeover time for the newly unveiled banknotes is too short. So Nigerians feel, as much as it could be, it's a good thing for those who agree with that, but also maybe they needed enough time to do this exchange of these new notes, and that unless authorities extend the deadline, up to 40% of Nigerian citizens without access to banks could lose their savings. And so, Nigeria mobile money market has really been growing, and the mobile money stands for the digital service that allows financial transactions via mobile devices, including smartphones and tablets and things like that, and computer, also to help in providing additional services such as account information and bill payments and bank transfers. You receive all that on your phones nowadays. So the smartphone has really transformed the banking sector or the money sector or the financial sector, not just in Nigeria but around the world. And the mobile money includes numerous technologies such as there in Nigeria, the digital wallet, the unstructured supplementary services data, the near-field communications and such like. Now, these technologies offer secured and convenient payment solutions in comparison to the conventional cash based transaction methods. And in Nigeria, the rising internet connectivity along with the growing adoption of smartphones is currently driving the market for mobile money. So the government, that's why the government is really pushing, maybe this move is meant to push more people to use the mobile money banking or money transfers and all that. That is like what we do here in Kenya, and I'm proud to say that we were the first country to come up with this innovation, and we're happy to see the rest of the world, embracing this. So that's a good thing. So the mobile money transactions in Nigeria rose to 4.86 trillion naira in the first 4 months of 2022 from 136.85 billion within the first 4 months of 2019. So you see, so there has been a transformation. There has been an increase of more people embracing this. So maybe by the government putting all these harsh measures on the tangible cash, but they're also doing so because they want people to use the cashless money transfers and transactions. And I understand on one side, because with that, then the government will be able to really monitor and see how this money is moving, because such technologies, they do offer data to the government. So the government is really able to trace this money and know what's really going on through these transactions. So that is one way. And also to curb the issue of, now see, they have over 80% of their money. They used to, but now from the reports I just read you there earlier, now it's just about 30% that cannot be accounted for, but everybody else has taken back their money to the banks to be exchanged and all that. But before then, it was over 80% of the Nigerian currency was in circulation but could not be accounted for. So I think this move could go a long way in helping in solving that problem, and I think that's why the government is insisting on these limits that you can withdraw from the ATMs and all that, so that people are encouraged to use the mobile money transfers and transactions and all that. And the value of mobile money transactions in Nigeria has increased by 3,454.46%. That's a lot, equivalent to 4.86 trillion naira in the first 4 months of 2022. So when you look at the figures, I'm not a financial person, but when you just look at the figures, even just from the face value, you can see what that even means, and the progress that is being made, and why maybe the government is finding it very important to tap into this new way of doing things there. And according to data provided by the Nigerian Interbank Settlement System, NIBSS, the number of telecommunications subscribers in the nation recorded a 13.98% jump to 201.31 million in the corresponding month of 2022 from 176.62 in April 2019. Similarly, the report noted that mobile devices drove payment in 2020, accounting for 43% of total transaction in 2020, with 35%. So the reason why I went to look for all this data is because I wanted to know, while the government was pushing for people to embrace this mobile banking and internet banking to some wider extent, I wanted to know how many people have access, say, to a mobile phone, say, to internet banking. But from the statistics, numbers don't lie. You can see, majority of Nigerians, I'm assuming even those in the rural areas, majority of them have embraced this, and this is what they use. And according to the data, in 2020, mobile devices drove the payment in 2020. So this is something that perhaps the government is monitoring, and have seen that it has become the new norm for Nigerians when they're transacting, when they're making payments or receiving payments and all that. So, but why are we finding so much opposition to this new policy then? I think that will be the bigger question. And the perceived growth in the volume of mobile money transactions in Nigeria also spurred the adoption of instant payment, according to NIBSS. Data from the mobile inter-scheme portal showed a significant increase in the volume of mobile transactions, and started during the pandemic, which is consistent with these instant payments, So it's easier. So I have already explained why the Central Bank of Nigeria introduced this new policy and these new notes. And apart from what I've already explained, it also sees the policy as a way of addressing the huge amount of currency outside the formal financial sector, which I've already told you, and at that time stood at 85% of banknotes circulated outside the banking system, largely because of hoarding and illicit financial transactions. Okay. And the introduction of the bank verification number system, which requires depositors to have a unique number that could be used to determine who they really are, has encouraged criminals and money launderers to operate outside the banking system. So the government had introduced the bank verification number system. And because of that, and this bank verification number system required, if you're going to deposit money, you need to have a unique number that could be used to determine who you really are. And because of that, the criminal enterprises said, no, that is the end of us and the formal financial institutions. We're not taking this money to the bank. We'll just have our mattress banking central banks in our homes, and I don't know where else they kept their money. I guess in safes in their homes. So they stopped. So because of that, there was so much money in circulation, but not in the formal financial sector. And the circulation of large quantities of money outside the banking system, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, makes it challenging to conduct effective monetary policies. So with all these factors, I totally understand why the Nigerian government found it necessary to put this policy in place. But of course, it is the timing that is suspect. It was done just a few months to the election. And the election is just a few days away. I know we talk about it like it's coming up later on. Today is on the 9th. The elections, Nigerians are going to the elections on the 25th of this month. So it was very close. Now, some others have argued this policy is not useful. And the central bank, the way it handled this matter, the urgency in which it handled this matter, I think for others, they find it very puzzling. And the problem it claims the policy change will solve, they're saying, there are others who are saying this is not a new thing. And the others who don't see this policy as being publicly explained, and the way the government was explaining and the reasons it's giving, if at all this will foster a cashless economy. But if you're going back to the data that I've just read you there, and then a number of people who have been already, transacting through the cashless way, then I don't know why some people would, will be opposed to this. But apart from politicians, top government officials, or those involved in the illicit financial transactions, most Nigerians don't stash huge sums of money. And that's why when I was telling you that who went to the court, it's just a few governors who are represented who made this move halted yesterday. It is the politicians. And some argue that that's the reason why they're fighting. And why are you introducing this very harsh policy that seems to punish Nigerians who are not the hoarders of these monies? Because the argument is a lot of these people are politicians, and those who are involved in these illicit financial transactions are very few, and a lot of them are just close to these politicians anyway. But the common Nigerian does not hoard money in the house and has, a bank account perhaps, or, they don't have this large amount of money that the central bank will not account for. And the country's employment rate is about 33%, and the minimum wage in Nigeria is about $67 US per month. Most Nigerians don't have enough money in their bank accounts to be worried about the withdrawal limits. So they're saying even these withdrawal limits, that will affect some class of Nigerians, So for those who are arguing that this policy is not useful, those are just some of the things and the arguments that they are putting across. And anyway, so the implementation also has been questioned, the way the government has been implementing this new policy. And people have been given, they were initially given up to the 31st, then it was, the extension was made until the 10th of February, that is tomorrow, to return the old Naira notes to banks, so the central bank can have this and account for it and get this new, notes but the 38 million Nigerians who don't have, who are 36% of the adult population, don't have bank accounts and have no choice but to hold on to the old notes. Banks don't have enough of the new ones to exchange. So that is just one of the problems that is being exhibited by implementation of this new policy. 36% of the adults in Nigeria don't have a bank account. And that is equivalent to 38 million Nigerians. Now, that's a huge number. You know, Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, followed by Ethiopia. They have over 2 million in terms of their population. And so 38 million Nigerians don't have bank accounts. So that is a very huge number, accounting for 36%. And because of that, and one of the requirements of these policies is if you are returning your money to the bank, your note, then the bank can't just give you your money back. Then I think you're required to open a bank account. And a lot of these people, they don't have that huge amounts of money that they feel they should be required to have a bank account. And, so they will decide to hold on to, the older notes. So that is the challenge that is there. But also the government had put across 30,000 agents to go especially to areas like this and see that they're able to get these old notes and perhaps convince these people to exchange their notes. And unbanked Nigerians cannot deposit the old notes in an account because, an account is very necessary. So it's quite interesting. So the challenges there that, this policy implementation and the timing of the policy announcement, like I've said, and the rollout is also not perhaps the best. Domestic and foreign investors are already jittery about the upcoming elections and the state of the Nigerian economy, and this new policy will add another layer of uncertainty, as I have explained there later. And for a country that is grappling with slow economic growth, inflation, and exchange rate volatility, the last thing the central bank should do is destabilize the economy by introducing a policy whose immediate benefits are questionable. And I think when I was going through one of the headlines just now, one of the papers from Nigeria, is it the IMF? The IMF has talked about this, has warned about the implementation and how this will affect the economy in Nigeria, because this has brought a lot of unnecessary tension, and in Nigeria. So I was just trying to look for that story. A journalist arrested for buying rice with fake bank transfer. That is interesting. And Naira gained 0.07% at investors exporters window. So there is a story I think I read in one of the cases there in one of the newspapers there that was explaining this. What position of IMF gave a warning yesterday. So, and the latest on this story, a lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Mike Ozekome, has explained the judgment of the Supreme Court restraining the federal government from implementing the Central Bank of Nigeria's February 10th ultimatum for the old 200, 500 and 1,000 Naira banknotes to cease being legal tender in the country. Ozekome, who featured on one of the television stations yesterday in Nigeria, say the Supreme Court only paused the implementation of the deadline, saying the Apex Court had not decided on the matter. He further explained that the Apex Court gave the judgment so as to prevent the subject matter of the suit from being truncated. Explaining the development, Ozekeme said the Supreme Court has not decided the matter. All it has done is to fall back to the decision like Otoe versus CBN. In the matters of extreme urgency, you can grant an interim order, even if be an expert, to prevent the subject matter of the suit being truncated. So it is it is becoming a problem. And a judgment that followed a motion expert on behalf of the three northern states, Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara, on February 3rd, filed a suit seeking to halt the implementation of the Central Bank of Nigeria's policy. So what he's saying is that the Federal High Court has not stopped the circulation of this new notes. It's not saying now let's go back to the older currency. It has just halted the deadline because of a case that had already been submitted in the courts for it to be determined. I think at the Apex Court. And I think I've gotten that story on. I wanted to see the IMF's. All right, I wanted to see the IMF's. Yes, I think I got it. The story on the IMF, it urged the Central Bank of Nigeria to extend Naira swap deadline as scarcity bites. Though the International Monetary Fund on Wednesday urged the Central Bank of Nigeria to extend the February 10th deadline set for the swap of old high-value Naira notes if the hiccups in getting the new notes persist. In the light of hardships caused by disruptions to trade and payments due to the shortage of the new banknotes available to the public, in spite of measures introduced by the Central Bank of Nigeria to mitigate the challenges in the banknote swap process, the IMF encourages the CBN to consider extending the deadline should problems persist in the next few days leading up to the February 10th, 2023 deadline. IMF President Representative to Nigeria, Ari Eisen, said in a statement issued on behalf by Laraba Bonnet, Office Manager for Resident Representation in Nigeria. The CBN extended the deadline for the expiration of the high denomination notes from 31st to 10th of February after long queues at banks swelled and commercial activities across the country were adversely affected. For one, manufacturers say they expect a 25% drop in sales, partly due to the Naira scarcity. The country of 200 million people plus is still mired in a cash crisis that has denied several Nigerians of cash, with some economists estimating first quarter GDP to take a hit. As a result, it looks increasingly unlikely that the February 10th deadline, which we now know the bank has already, no, not the bank, the court has already ruled on that, will be possible to have that deadline. And of course, the Supreme Court on Wednesday ordered its suspension. The Supreme Court issued an interim injunction restraining the federal government from suspending the acceptance of the old Naira notes or on the deadline. So that is just the warning that and the advice that the International Monetary Fund was giving the Nigerian government. So I think outside of just some of the reasons that are being given, but you can see the arguments from both sides, for those who are for the new policy and for those who are against, and some of the reasons that they're giving forth. But I think a lot of this has to do with politics, because when you see banks hoarding the money instead of putting it in the ATMs for people to have access, then politics most likely is at play. So hopefully Nigerians will find a way out. Maybe after the elections things will calm down and this money will be accessible. But either way, let them do what's best for the country. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. Yeah. All right. I was hoping some of you will help me with the latest of this information there. James Friday, good morning. And Chas Munga and the rest of you who are watching, thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you here later with more news from across the continent of Africa around 3 p.m. East African time. You can look that up and tell me and find out what time it will be from where you will be watching from. My name is Miriam Agoto. A very good morning to you.